Back to Elk childhood. She believed the devil didn't look monstrous as the scriptures described, but rather wore a beautiful disguise. No matter what the theology teachers preached, that demons bore nothing but hideous forms, meant to terrify and deceive. Elk remained convinced evil often came wrapped in beauty. If her theology teachers ever heard her say that, they would have been furious. Elk smiled faintly at the memory as she flipped through a book. How would a demon trick us, if not through beauty? Back to present. She had just turned the corner of the hallway when she saw them two figures caught in an intimate moment. She froze, stunned. But she said nothing. Her lips stayed sealed. Elk had seen many bodies before. She had grown up surrounded by anatomy models, taxidermied animals, even decomposing corpses. But the body of the man before her was different, strikingly handsome. The man smirked, amused by her reaction. That broke her trance. She realized she had been staring. The man, 𝔄𝔪𝔬𝔫𝔱𝔢𝔡, quickly spoke up in his defense. "Don't get the wrong idea," he said. "She just bumped into me in a rush." He gestured to the woman beside him. "Lady 𝔗𝔪𝔬𝔫𝔱𝔢, right?" Lady 𝔗𝔪𝔬𝔫𝔱 nodded nervously, stuttering her agreement. Elk remained silent, her face unreadable. After a pause, she finally spoke. "I'll assume all those red marks, what some would call lipstick stained, kisses, are just bruises from the impact." 𝔄𝔪𝔬𝔫𝔱𝔢 was caught off guard. He didn't know how to respond. Elk turned to Lady 𝔗𝔪𝔬𝔫𝔱𝔢. "The service will end soon." Lady 𝔗𝔪𝔬𝔫𝔱𝔢 nodded again, nearly stumbling as she hurried away, leaving the two of them alone. Elk said nothing more. She turned her back on 𝔄𝔪𝔬𝔫𝔱𝔢 and began walking down the hallway. Then she stopped. Without a word, she looked back at the man still standing in silence, half hidden in the shadows at the end of the corridor. One morning, in the estate of Eberhard, the maids were busy preparing breakfast for the family. In the dining hall, the Eberhard family sat together, eating breakfast peacefully beneath the high ceiling and ornate chandelier. The atmosphere was calm, as usual, until the silence was broken. Duke Julick Eberhard, the head of the mansion, suddenly slammed his hand on the table. He had just received news. 𝔄𝔪𝔬𝔫𝔱𝔢 was back. At that moment, the air grew heavier. Bjorn Eberhard, the eldest son, straightened in his seat. Duchess Charlotte Eberhard turned her gaze toward her husband. As they continued to eat, the topic of conversation shifted. 𝔄𝔪𝔬𝔫𝔱𝔢's return meant only one thing: the marriage between His Majesty and the Princess of Esturin had been confirmed. Julick's expression was unreadable as he processed the implications. 𝔄𝔪𝔬𝔫𝔱𝔢 was already back in the country. His thoughts drifted back 3 years ago. The queen had died while giving birth to the prince. Not long after, the prince had been named ambassador to Esturin. Perhaps, even back then, this marriage had already been planned. Duchess Charlotte reflected that the young majesty already had 2 children. For someone to become queen as a second wife was not a simple task. The duke, holding his glass of wine, added another piece of information. The princess was only 21 years old. Bjorn noted that the young princess would bring a fiefdom as part of her dowry, and that 𝔄𝔪𝔬𝔫𝔱𝔢 would receive the title of count, granted by the king himself. Julick fell silent. Then, with a deep sigh, he spoke again. In his view, it was now impossible to stop 𝔄𝔪𝔬𝔫𝔱𝔢 from obtaining the title, and from attempting to sway the entire kingdom of Brant. While the conversation grew more intense, Elk, the duke's daughter, remained quiet. She held her wine glass delicately, as though her mind were floating elsewhere. When her father addressed her, she nodded politely, though her expression remained distant. Everyone at the table knew the weight behind this marriage. The Princess of Esturin was a loyal believer in the new faith, and she had established the Pontifex system, a reform that had already begun to reshape the world. Duke Julick turned his attention to Elk, his tone steady but firm. He reminded her that she had once held the title of Pontifex, and that it was her responsibility to build a connection with the soon-to-be queen. He warned her 𝔄𝔪𝔬𝔫𝔱𝔢 must not be the one to gain the queen and impose as favor. Across the table, Duchess Charlotte smiled gently, reassuring her husband that Elk would be fine. Her confidence in her daughter was quiet but unwavering. Elk said nothing. She only tightened her grip on her wine glass. Her face was composed, nonchalant, but her stillness spoke volumes. It was Renata Eberhard, Bjorn's wife, who broke the tension with a bright, playful smile. She reminded the table that Elk had always been top of her class, first place in the Pontifex examinations. The Duke should not worry. Julick agreed immediately. There was a glint of pride in his eyes. He congratulated Elk on her accomplishments, adding that she had made him proud. Alk responded politely, offering a soft "thank you." Her voice was quiet, her eyes lowered. Renata watched her carefully. Alk and a pose, as silence was unusual, and she noticed it. Renata then spoke again, her tone gentle but pointed. She suggested that Alk should start forming connections now. Curious, the Duke asked her to explain. Renata mentioned Dorothea Bachmann, a noblewoman well known in high society. Dorothea was often seen at every event, actively expanding her network. She even carried her scripture book wherever she went, a visible sign of her devotion. In contrast, Alk rarely left the estate. Alk said nothing. She continued to sip her tea, quiet and expressionless. But inside, she remembered Renata herself had served as a pontifex 8 years ago. Renata knew how the process worked. The title of pontifex was not inherited. It was granted through vote, and votes came from relationships, influence, visibility. Renata was concerned. Alk's circle was small, too small. She continued, explaining that many gatherings were scheduled for the coming month. It would be the perfect opportunity for Alk to introduce herself to the right people. It was time to make her presence known, especially since many young ladies would be attending just for the chance to catch a glimpse of 𝔄𝔪𝔬𝔫𝔱𝔢. Bjorn let out a bitter laugh. The irony wasn't lost on him. Then, Renata turned to Alk, smiling slyly. She asked if Alk had ever met Reiner. The question caught Alk off guard. She froze. Then, she looked away, her mind drifting. She remembered something she had seen from the hallway. But she said nothing. She denied it. She had not seen 𝔄𝔪𝔬𝔫𝔱𝔢. Renata accepted the answer with a glint of amusement. Her grin grew mischievous. 𝔄𝔪𝔬𝔫𝔱𝔢 was back hand soon. All eyes would be on him. Mothers, daughters, and sisters across the kingdom would be watching closely. With a chuckle, Renata wondered aloud who would be the one to fall under his spell. Alk smiled faintly, keeping her eyes on her tea, as though the entire conversation had never touched her at all. On that day, Alk had simply laughed at Renata's jokes. But now,